Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Welcome. I'll give people a few minutes to log on today. Thanks so much for being here. Happy December. I assume people are maybe getting ready for holiday break, winter break. I know that's where, where my mind is today, and I'm sure it's probably the same for some of you. So I appreciate you all being here and joining us. And we'll give it another minute or so as people come in. Feel free to say hello in the chat if you'd like to. All right, give it a few more seconds. And then we will jump right in. And again, if you're just joining us, feel free to say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And we'll be using the chat a lot today. So if you don't get a chance to do it now, hopefully you'll be able to join as our session continues on. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. So again, thank you all so much for being here. This is our final Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar for the year. This is number 8. So we've covered a lot together, and we're looking forward to rounding it out by talking about community engagement. So we started with community engagement in January, launching the community engagement guide, and now we're kind of having a full circle moment, coming back and seeing what community engagement has looked like over this past year. So thank you all for being here. And I guess, you know, most of you who have attended these webinars know who we are, but again, if you're new or just joining us for the first time, I'm Corey Johnson with the Safe Routes Partnership. I'm our program and engagement manager, and we are a national organization that works to advance safe walking and rolling, both to and from schools, but also other everyday destinations, you know, parks, other places that people might go on a regular basis. So if you're new, welcome. And if you've been here before, nice to see you all again. As we usually do, the session is being recorded and the chat is open, as you can see, so feel free to continue participating. I'll have some chat discussion questions as we move throughout the presentation. So please do join in the chat as you would like to, share your highlights, resources. We've seen a lot of chat action this past year, so we hope that can continue as we're rounding out December. And we will be sending out the recording and the presentation slides and a survey right after the webinar. So if you missed anything, don't worry, we will get you what you need after the webinar is finished. So again, like I mentioned, I'm Corey with Safe Routes Partnership. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And I see that those of you who've been in the chat have been introducing yourselves. Feel free to share your name, location, your connection to Safe Routes. And since we're kind of doing like an end of the year retrospective, I'd love to hear from you all if you could share a word or a phrase that sums up your Safe Routes work from 2022. So thinking back on this past year, work that you've done, work that you've witnessed, I'd love to see, a word or phrase that sums up your 2022 year in Safe Routes to School. So I'll give you all a moment to introduce yourselves and get your words in the chat. I'm just going to check and see who's joining us today. Let's see. So we have Kansas, San Mateo, Santa Fe, Wyoming, awesome. Nevada, New Jersey, all of our Colorado folks, hello. Tacoma, Washington, Alaska, Des Moines, Philly, love Philly. LA, Portland, great. All right, just some words that are coming to the chat as you all are sharing. Busy, I hear that. Growth. What else do we have here? Planting big seeds, love that. Momentum, foundational, rewarding, change. Great, keep them coming. Reopening, yes. Educational, meaningful, partnerships, adaptable. Awesome. I totally, relate to a lot of these different words you all put together in the chat. I guess mine might be new. I've noticed a lot of new people to Safe Routes, which is awesome, and forming new relationships with different people in the Safe Routes world. Just again, like this, like new momentum, new energy. So that's going to be my word that I'll offer to the group today. And again, feel free to continue sharing and engaging in the chat box. I love to hear what you all have to add. So like I mentioned at the top of the webinar that, last, I guess in January, we launched our Colorado Community Engagement Guide that I worked on putting together along with some partners at Colorado DOT and the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, CDPHE. We worked together to put together this resource all about community engagement in Colorado, but has also been used for other communities outside of Colorado. And for those of you who might have missed that first webinar, I just wanted to kind of give you a brief refresher on what this document is and why we're talking about it again today. So we wanted to put together a resource that really outlines a community engagement framework that highlights best practices and has some different strategies and tips that you can use in your community engagement work, both in Safe Routes to School and also for other programs that you might be working on. Each section has some guiding questions, lots of cool Colorado programs that are featured. We also have links to tools, resources, worksheets, and just other additional materials that might be helpful for you in your community engagement work. And there's also a large emphasis on equity. Just to go back to, our original intention for putting this together and, that focus on equity and why it's so important. I just wanted to remind you of something we talked about in our last webinar in January and why we want to focus on equity. So the Colorado Office of Health Equity has a statement that says that equity is when everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from, has the opportunity to thrive. This requires eliminating barriers like poverty and repairing injustices in systems such as education, health, criminal justice, and transportation. So we really kind of use that, that statement and that lens as we put together this resource. And it's really like the common thread between everything in the guide. And of course, there's the engagement piece. So why do we want to focus on engagement? Well, first, because it's one of the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School. And we know that, the best Safe Routes programs and initiatives begin by listening to students, families, teachers, school leaders, and other community members, really working alongside the community to determine, what's the best way to, to develop and implement your Safe Routes to School program. And we like to talk about Safe Routes to Schools, a team effort, all hands on deck, a community-focused program. And so, that engagement E is really foundational to your Safe Routes success. So just thinking about engagement in general in 2022, and again, I saw this kind of echoed in some of your comments that you put in the chat box. We've found that there's a lot of new momentum behind Safe Routes to School. So, there's the new Safe Routes to School funding, there are new projects and programs, a lot of new coordinators and champions, a lot of increased community interest for a lot of reasons. Some of it does have to do with funding. Other reasons might just be because, having, a few years where we weren't able to get out together and connect, that interest in being able to, gather and walk and roll together has really increased. So we've seen definitely an uptick in engagement compared to, some of the past years when we really did have to, kind of alter the way that we run Safe Routes to School and community engagement in general. And again, just thinking about why community engagement is so important now, and a lot of you already know this and are doing this. Engagement is really what builds community and helps increase that social connectedness. Helps to amplify underrepresented voices, helps you prioritize, who needs what. And we know that a lot of communities, have a lot of needs have changed. It can also help increase program participation, helps hold yourself accountable for doing what you say you want to do, and just provides that roadmap for building a more just and equitable society. It also brings opportunities to explore new ideas and can really help you make sure that your Safe Routes to School program, is fitting the needs of the community today. And again, recognizing that some of those needs might have shifted, especially over the past few years. So I did this in my first webinar presentation. I'm going to do it in this webinar presentation because you can't say this enough. But when I think about community engagement, I really think about being able to talk to each other, especially people who might not look, think, or act like you. So again, said it in the first webinar. I will say it in this one too, that a lot of this work, whether we're talking in a Zoom chat or in a Zoom room or in person, having these conversations about what people want, what people need, what people value is a really important part of community engagement. And hopefully some of the things in the guide will help facilitate some of these discussions and conversations. So if you remember one thing from today, remember that talking to each other and sharing is important. So again, just to review what's in the community engagement guide, and again, a lot of you are already familiar with this framework. We kind of have 6 different, steps, phases, parts of this framework for you to consider in your community engagement efforts. The first being to reflect on your role as a community partner, then researching where you're working, knowing who you're working with, knowing where you're working, partnering with other organizations to build community relationships, planning thoughtful, culturally responsive community engagement experiences, and then implementing your community engagement experiences and activities, and then finally sustaining that engagement beyond a single event or initiative. So that community engagement isn't just like a one-time deal, or one event and then you're done. Community engagement requires building those relationships and putting in those supportive structures in place so that your engagement can be sustained long-term. So to kick us off today, I wanted to start talking about a group that we put together, what basically wanted to put our community engagement guide into action and to see, okay, how does this actually look and how does this actually work, in a real life situation. So we organized a Safe Routes to School. It's weird to call it like a pilot training or a pilot group. I'll call it a working group because it really was about, kind of that collaboration and sharing ideas and brainstorming. So the working group we put together, we had participants from Boulder County, Boulder Valley School District. They were working on a multi-generational bike uptake program. So thinking about, some of the challenges around school travel, whether it's school bus shortages, school bus driver shortages, people not being able to travel to school, in ways that they usually can, and thinking about how, bikes could be a solution to that community problem. And we also had partners from Pueblo County Public Health that were working on a large-scale neighborhood data collection campaign. So collecting data that can be used for lots of different initiatives, whether it's a complete streets policy, an obesity prevention program, just being able to collect that data that could then be used to, to move other initiatives forward. So we met this fall. We had 4 virtual Zoom sessions where we, kind of talked through the community engagement framework and tried out some ideas and did a lot of brainstorming and had a lot of questions. Probably walked away with more questions than answers. But it was a great time for us to, come together and just see, again, what does this framework look like in practice? So when we first got started, again, these are, it was me and our partners and a few other partners from CDPHE, we decided to start this working group by coming up with a set of community agreements. And this is something that we do, both to help us all, build consensus and be on the same page when it comes to community engagement, working together, and also knowing that we're going to have some conversations, around things like, like equity, or some of your community's engagement successes or challenges. And so we wanted to make sure that we created a space where people felt like they could share and reflect. And so, those of you who might be doing community engagement, or it might be, organizing a listening session or some other session that might involve, conversations or coming to consensus, putting together a set of community agreements can be a great way to get started. And so we just did this on a Jamboard that I put together in Google. And this is what we came up with for our community agreements. So these are things you might be familiar with, allowing space for others to speak, staying present, being solution oriented, one person speaking at a time, using I statements. Even, being in a virtual setting, trying to keep, Zoom side work to a minimum. I know it's tough when, like your email inbox is right there and it's pinging, but being present is really important. And also assuming positive intent. So that's one that I always like to highlight when I think about community agreements, because we often have conversations with people where we might have competing priorities or just really strong disagreements on something, but ultimately we want the same thing, whether it's, to make it safer for students to walk to school or to improve the overall, well-being of a community. So even if somebody might have a disagreement, assuming or, have a different priority, assuming that positive intent, is, can be a helpful way to have a productive conversation. And somebody just asked why using I statements when speaking. So I think that when you use I statements, it really makes it helps you own what you're saying. So unless you have permission to represent an organization or a community, it's always helpful to use I statements so that people know that you're speaking on behalf of yourself, not on behalf of somebody else. If somebody gives you permission to speak on behalf of, again, your organization or a community, then that's fine. You can make that known. But if if you have a certain, thought or feeling or idea, being able to say, I want more biking and rolling, as opposed to we want, I think is a helpful way to just let people know where that statement is coming from. Good question. Any others? Okay. So our first session, actually our first two sessions of this working group, we really thought about reflecting on our roles as community partners. And so again, another chat question I have for you all. I'd love to hear from you all about what keeps you doing Safe Routes work. And that was one of the reflection questions that we asked in the community engagement working group. So why are we here? why are we doing this? We know that Safe Routes work can be, can be hard and challenging, but also super rewarding. So I'm curious to hear from you all. What keeps you doing Safe Routes work? Knowing that it's, that it's busy, and that community engagement, is hard work. If you want to share some of your thoughts in the chat box, please feel free to do so. So what keeps you doing this work? Those of you who are new, why are you excited about doing Safe Routes work? And as you kind of add your thoughts to the chat box, I'll continue on. But if you have any thoughts or reflections, please feel free to add those. So again, we know that reflection is a really important part of community engagement. It helps ground our work, it helps us build trust with people. It's always also just an important practice to, think about your own strengths and weaknesses as a community partner. Think about things that you've done well, think about things that you could, possibly improve in the future. Being able to just take a few moments to reflect on your practice is a great part of, of improving, who you are as a community partner and as a community engagement practitioner. And just looking through the chat box. All right, some great reflections in here. So again, keep adding, please. So a few national trends that we noticed as far as reflection and community engagement this past year. And this one's kind of hard because, I'm one person, so I'm not, privy to people's, personal or team reflections, but just some things that people have shared with me or that I've observed either in different conversations or even on our Safe Routes School listserv. I've noticed that, and we kind of know this about Safe Routes to School, but that people care a lot about the communities that they serve, and people care a lot about Safe Routes to School. I think that especially now, again, the past few years, Safe Routes has looked a bit different, and we've kind of seen this renewed interest and energy and love and commitment to Safe Routes. There's also a desire for community engagement and a desire for people to improve their community engagement or maybe evolve their community engagement from what it was before. We've also noticed an increased focus on racial equity, people having more conversations about racial equity and how that impacts their work with the communities that they, that they serve, with the students that they're working with. We also just noticed that reflection is hard. I think that there are, some reflection questions that are hard. Making the time for reflecting is hard, but we still need to do it. We still need to have these conversations and these reflective moments. So those are a few trends that we've noticed. So for the Colorado, for our engagement pilot, our working group, we actually did a virtual Placeit reflection. So for those of you who might be new to Placeit, this is a model building framework that can be used mainly for, in planning processes, but we kind of adapted this one to fit our partnership or our engagement reflection. So I asked participants to build a model of a memorable community engagement experience that they either participated in or facilitated. So again, normally with Placeit, we ask people to build a model of like, a memory of walking to school or what they want their route to school to look like. But in this case, we decided to use one of our reflection questions to build a model. So these are the models that our participants came up with. So these are models of memorable community engagement experiences that people either facilitated or participated in. And as you can see, these are just everyday objects that people used. They had them sitting around their homes, in their offices. So these are our community engagement memory models, is what I'll call them. And once we built those models, we pulled out some common themes related to our community engagement experiences. And so some of the themes that we saw reflected were, things like, experiences that were fun, that were hopeful, that were about getting people together, that were interactive, going to where people are, activities where you're talking with people as opposed to talking to or at people. Asking people's opinions, sharing knowledge, having back and forth communication, and also just engagement experiences that are fun and hopeful. I think that a lot of, community engagement, we hope that some of it's fun, a lot of it's fun. It's not always fun, but we hope that, there's some fun and hopeful moments too. And so those are ones that just are really memorable to our working group participants. And again, we just did this virtually on Zoom. So engagement can be virtual if necessary, but it can also be done in person. And again, the benefit of doing a reflection by doing some sort of like creative or model building activity is that it's fun, can be low risk depending on the question that you're asking. It's something that's hands-on and that can be easily adaptable. So, if you're working with a group of students or a group of other Safe Routes practitioners, or if you're on a Safe Routes to School, task force or committee, take 5 or 10 minutes and do a little, hands-on Placeit reflection about, your year in Safe Routes to School or an experience that was really memorable related to Safe Routes to School. And it's just another way, again, to reflect, build community, have some fun, and do something that's really hands-on. And just thinking about how to, adapt this activity for in-person. Again, we did this virtually, but we do have a whole guide about Placeit, the Placeit method. If those of you who are new might want to explore that, having a fun station for materials, going outside and collecting building materials in nature. So you can do this with people collecting, twigs and branches, and they can build their model off of that. Displaying your models, doing a little like gallery walk and roll, and even encouraging participants to give their model a name or a title. So there are lots of ways to incorporate model building into your community engagement efforts. And this is how we decided to do it for the Colorado working group. So after we did our Placeit reflection, we did some individual and team reflections, and we asked ourselves a few questions related to our community engagement experiences. And again, these are questions that are in the community engagement guide. So we wanted to get a sense of, how do these questions play out in real life? So what do you know about this community? How did you gain this knowledge? How might your power and privilege impact the community? What excites you about community engagement, and what makes you nervous? So that was our individual reflection. And then we also thought about some team reflection questions. So what does community engagement look like in the past? What does it look like currently? What do we say we value as an agency or organization? And then do our actions actually match our values? So just a few takeaways from the individual and team reflections from both Boulder and Pueblo. There's lots of knowledge about their communities. So I think that both, both partners who were there know a lot about their communities and are also looked upon as trusted partners. So these are people who have relationships with community members. There is a level of trust there. And then a few other questions that kind of came up. I think that both groups talked about being mindful of asking communities to engage when there isn't always follow through. So, you ask people to fill out your survey or your travel tally or, contribute to a plan that you're working on. And sometimes people might, be a part of that community engagement effort and then not know like where their survey responses went or where their feedback went. So, how do you kind of work through that process? We also talked about what do you do if your values don't align with the values of your colleagues or supervisors or partners. So again, we know that people have different priorities, different goals. And we also know that not everybody is as into community engagement as we might be. So what happens when you have to, kind of try to, convince other people to get on board, or you have to align those values where there isn't alignment in the first place. And then another takeaway is just that it's hard to find time to reflect. Making the time is important. And again, I think that having this working group, really kind of forced us to take that time to, to reflect. Some of these other questions I'm going to come back to later on in your presentation, but these are just some main takeaways from our reflection session. So I will just pause for a moment, check the chat box here. Let's see. All right. So the next part of the community engagement process or framework is about researching the community where you're working. And so I'd love to hear, again, from you all in the chat box, thinking about this past year, especially if there's anything that you've learned about the community where you've worked. So maybe something that the community where you work. So maybe something that you might not have learned that you did learn. You might be working in a community, for the first time. You might be working in a community where you've worked for a long time. But have you learned anything new or different about the community where you work? So I'll give people a moment to share some ideas in the chat. Anything new that you might have learned that you didn't learn before. Any new insights into the community that you work with. And as you share those ideas, I will go into, again, why research is important. Those of you who've heard me talk about this before, this will, be common knowledge to you, but that research really helps you build your understanding of the community, gives context around persisting inequities, helps build trust, can help inform future programming, can also dispel negative narratives. So again, thinking about like some new things you might have learned about the community, did the thing that you learned that was new help dispel a negative narrative that might have existed in the past? So again, just some national trends around community around community research. We know that communities are changing. Demographics are changing. People's needs and wants are changing. We also know that there's a lot of research that's already built into Safe Routes to School because Safe Routes is such a community-based program, and that you do, travel tallies and surveys and events, and it's constantly about talking to people about what they want or need. A lot of this research is actually a part of Safe Routes to School. We also know that research is an ongoing process. So again, because communities are always changing, and because you all are, out on the ground working with people, on a day-to-day basis, that you're constantly learning, constantly discovering new things about the community where you work. And we also know that there's, kind of like this, I wouldn't say tension, but different perspectives when it comes to quantitative versus qualitative data. So knowing that, like a lot of times we are asked for those hard numbers, whether there's survey numbers or just numerical data. We also hear a lot of really amazing stories, right? Or anecdotes from people. So how do we capture that and incorporate that into our community research as well? So those are some national things that we're seeing. So again, going back to the, community engagement working group, we found again that both Boulder County, and in Pueblo know a lot about their communities. Like they, have done a lot of research, have those relationships. Boulder County is doing these community placement workshops all over, gathering information from, from students, from families, from community members. And that's been a way that they've been able to, do some of their community research. And also, again, with Pueblo County doing their ongoing community interviews, for their data collection campaign, that's been a big part of their community research. So their research is also like a part of their, program implementation process as well. And then, of course, there are the surveys, student travel tallies, community conversations. Again, all of those things that are kind of built into what we already do are a part of the research process. So just some takeaways from both groups. Boulder, their team mentioned they have done a lot of research, and their question was actually, what becomes too much for community members? Are we surveying too much? Are we interviewing people too much? Are we having too many conversations? Like, when do we, as great as community engagement is, when might you need to kind of step back a bit? And in Pueblo, they also asked some similar questions. And also just talked about, having a lot of trust with community members and making sure that because there is that trust there, there's also some follow through. So again, like you have all this information, making sure that you kind of follow through and do something with the research that you've done. We also talked a bit about how do you justify spending time on community research. And again, kind of knowing that like there's this need to have quantitative data. How do you justify, sharing somebody's story? How is that, how can that be incorporated into a data set in a way that makes sense for, a supervisor or a grant funder? What does that look like? How do you document your community research? Do you put together a graph? Do you put together a story map? Like, what does the documentation look like? And then again, how do you turn that research into action? What does that look like? So if you have, your student travel tallies, or if you have feedback from a community listening session, what do you do with that? And how can you turn it into something that's really tangible? And so I will talk about that in our next session, which is actually about in our next part of the framework, which is about partnerships. So more coming to answer those questions. So the next part of the community engagement framework is partnering with other organizations or people to help build those relationships. So I'm curious if any of you have worked with any new partners this year, so people who you might not have partnered with before, but you've partnered with now. So whether it's, a local library or a new community group or a new school or somebody working in food or housing or an arts organization. I'm curious if you all have had any experiences of working with new partners and bringing new people into the Safe Routes fold. So again, I'll give it a minute. I will check the chat box here. Let's see. Yep, I did see someone mention that public engagement is big with controversial changes, and transportation and biking is controversial. Yes, I have definitely noticed that. I'm in DC, so I totally hear you about the controversial changes. Like that's part of the fabric of our city. Let's see, Kyler, we've learned that some of the communities we work in do not necessarily trust the state data tool that determines which zip codes are environmentally vulnerable. Yes, lots of conversations around trusting data in general and thinking about, ways to kind of, unpack why that is. I think it's really important to consider. Let's see, some partners people have worked with, local libraries, PE teachers, bike pet advocacy groups, environmental specialists, youth leadership partners, awesome. I think the environmental one is really important too. I've noticed a lot of new partnerships with environmental groups, climate justice groups. I think that'll just continue into the future. So good to know that that's on people's radar. So again, why do partnerships matter? Stretches resources, helps build community, helps increase capacity and buy-in, builds accountability, expands your knowledge, and also everybody needs support, right? You know that we can't do this work alone. It's hard to run a Safe Routes to School program alone. I don't know what that would look like, so our partners are really helpful. So thinking about some of the national, national trends around partnerships. So we know that, communities really want and need their partners to work together. I think in one of our past sessions, somebody had mentioned that, a community member, might get invited to attend, 5 different community meetings or 5 different outreach events. And that can be tiring. So how can you work together to put on, one event where people can kind of go to different areas and get the same, set of services or, be able to participate in different discussions in one event as opposed to having like 5 different meetings or 5 different events. And also knowing that a lot of these concerns that community members have do intersect with lots of other issues. Even in the chat box, we're talking about, climate justice and gun violence and transportation and housing, and all these things really work together. So that means that we as community partners need to work together. We've also noticed people engaging non-traditional partners. So I mentioned, libraries, colleges, universities, social workers, school counselors, traditional media partners, radio, TV, social media partners. And also the partners don't always have to be local. So even thinking about like our Safe Routes to School listserv, our Google group that is, super busy with people sharing ideas and resources. Could those people be your partners? We've also noticed people organizing regional meetups, having informal Zoom sessions. There are lots of ways for us to connect across across borders now, I guess. So some of your partners might be partners who live in other places, but who can still offer you some sort of, resources or advice or insight. So think about, kind of maintaining those virtual partnerships as well. So going back to our Colorado working group, some things that can for us when we were thinking about the partnerships. One is just that documentation piece, like I mentioned before. So, how do you document your data and your community research? And I'm thinking about how actually partners can help you with some of that documentation. So whether it's, partnering with a group that can do an infographic or a report or promotional materials, like your partners might be able to help you with some of that, that data and that research. The research process might be a bit hard for you that you might just not have time for. Can you partner with a local college who can put together, help you put together a report or a graph or a cool graphic. We also talked about asset mapping. So just knowing like what each partner brings to the table, right? Knowing that partners, everybody has their own set of skills, expertise, resources. How can you kind of work with your partners to figure out how each person can play a role in your, in your program? And just to talk a little bit about these more in depth. So I mentioned this in our evaluation webinar, but thinking about asking your partners to help you document your data. These are some examples for how to work with different partners to document data, whether it's putting together an annual report, whether it's reporting on a news event or a cool Safe Routes to School story, kind of involving your media partners, your social media partners. They can really help you kind of document your data and help you really tell your story. So again, we all have limited capacity and time. Our partners can help us put this together. So whether it's a communications team, a media team, a marketing team, graphic design team, volunteers, interns. These are people who can really help you tell your Safe Routes to School story. And again, are a part of, community engagement. Engaging partners is part of our community engagement process. And as far as asset mapping and thinking about who your partners are, a good way to kind of, get started in that process of building new partnerships or evolving existing partnerships is thinking about who are your partners. What resources or knowledge do they bring to the table? What are their areas of expertise? Who's ready and willing to do community engagement work? So if you need, volunteers, you need somebody who can help you, create a flyer or organize a listening session or run a walk audit or help with walk and roll to school day. Who's ready and willing to help do that work? Who's ready to maybe tackle some of those controversial, topics and ideas? Who can help you with that? And then who might be experiencing barriers to doing community engagement work? So again, we know that, all of our partners aren't necessarily in the same place as we are. We all have different priorities. So how can we start to work through those? And what are those barriers? Is it just like a lack of interest, lack of time or resources, not a priority, something else? But I think that it's important to really think about, kind of do that partnership reflection and partnership asset mapping and thinking about, who can bring what to your program. These are a few resources that Steph, who I think is on here today from CDP, she was, really generous in putting together and sharing for our group some resources around partnership asset mapping. And again, these are just tools that you all can use when you're thinking about starting new partnerships, thinking about existing partnerships, and figuring out how to, maintain a partnership, how to build a strong partnership, and thinking about how to determine, how each partner can play a role. So this is linked in the presentation, and I'll, again, share it out after the webinar is over. But yeah, just spending some time thinking about and reflecting on your partnerships is really important, and a great part that came out of the Colorado Working Group. So I'm going to pause again and just get a sense of what's happening in the chat box here. Let's see. Okay. I saw a few comments in the chat box about, new focus or even renewed focus on working in underserved communities, lower income neighborhoods, low income communities. Definitely a trend that we're noticing, in our work at Safe Routes, along with rural communities as well. Sometimes that can mean the same thing. Yeah, just something else that we're noticing and that's mirroring what those of you are talking about in the chat box. So next, we talked about planning thoughtful and culturally responsive community engagement experiences. And I'm curious if you all have any community engagement activities that you're planning for 2023. So, whether it's a bike and roll to school day or a walk audit or some other community event or engagement activity, focus group, data collection. I'm curious what's coming up for you in the new year. So I'll give you again, a moment to, to add your thoughts and ideas in the chat box. Yeah, any engagement activities that you're planning in the new year. So I see bike to school day events. I'm sure a lot of those will be coming up in, May, in the springtime, once the weather gets warmer. I've talked to some communities that are working on, pop-up, demonstrations, a lot of bike and pedestrian education events. Let's see, bike ped safety, walk audits. Great. And again, feel free to continue adding ideas to the chat box. Bike safety week. I saw somebody mention a high school bicycling team. Scott, that sounds really exciting. I feel like high school and Safe Routes to School is kind of like a new area for us. So I might be reaching out to you to see how your high school bicycling team goes. That sounds really awesome. Community walk audits, maybe around Valentine's Day with a love your route theme. That is awesome, Sarah. If you do that, please let us know how that goes. I love the thematic walk and roll or walk audit, and love your route is a great idea. Senior cycling, nice. All right, so keep those ideas coming in the chat box. And again, just thinking about why planning matters, why those events matter. It helps provide your roadmap, allows time for troubleshooting. If getting your plan early can help you determine if there's something that needs to be changed or updated. It allows you to incorporate your community research into your event, and also shows that you really value your community. So if you're doing a high school cycling program and you want to make it something that's relevant for high school students, including time to kind of like plan and work through what that looks like, is a good idea. Or if you're working with older adults, same thing, kind of incorporating those relevant points into the event that you're planning. And also, again, not overcomplicating it, right? So we know that having a plan is great, but you don't have to overplan or make things too complicated or cumbersome. So again, thinking about some national trends related to planning culturally responsive, Safe Routes to School events, and also Safe Routes to School programs in general. So kind of split this up into two different sections. So in general, we've noticed that, there's a lot of planning in general going on with Safe Routes to School. So whether that's applying for a planning grant or doing action planning around your Safe Routes to School program. So, maybe it's a new program and you're figuring out, what does this program look like? Maybe your program has been in existence for a few years and you kind of need to plan like your next steps, the next 3 years, next 5 years. We've also seen a lot of communities looking to incorporate Safe Routes to School into existing plans, whether it's Vision Zero plan or Complete Streets policy, wellness policy. It's a little preview for our January webinar. I'll talk about that at the end of the session, but how can you incorporate Safe Routes into existing plans already? And also just a lot more Safe Routes to School task forces and committees, a lot of coordinators who are kind of sitting on different transportation advisory boards, committees. So it's been nice to, see that collaboration and that teamwork in the planning process. And of course, it's also like the event planning, so like planning your walk and roll to school day event or planning your walk audit. So, things like consulting with partners and also adapting ideas from other programs. We notice a lot of that happening, with our webinars and Zoom chats and our Safe Routes to School Summit. There's a lot of like, sharing ideas, borrowing ideas, adapting ideas as you plan these new events, which is awesome. That's why we, do these, webinars and these engagement sessions with you all, so you can, connect and share and get new ideas. So thinking about, again, the Colorado working group that we put together, so actually the working group itself was a lot of the, was related to Safe Routes to School, planning and community engagement planning. So, the Boulder team and the Pueblo team, they would kind of talk through, events or ideas that they have, that are coming up, whether it's, conducting community interviews or, the multi-generational bike program, and kind of spending our time together to think about, work through some of those questions, some of those ideas. So the whole group was really an exercise in planning for upcoming events and activities. We also talked a lot about grant applications and creating plans as part of grant applications. So whether it's an evaluation plan or an engagement plan, what does that look like? What are some strategies for putting those types of plans together? So it's nice to kind of spend some time working through the different parts of planning with the two teams we worked with. And a few takeaways. One is we just found that it's helpful to talk through these ideas as a group. So again, if a lot of us might be working, a team of one or a team of a few, being able to connect with somebody else might be, in a different, area than you are, or a different sector. Just having like somebody to be, like a thought partner is a really important part of the planning process. And again, because we can do things virtually, can that be a phone call? Can it be a Zoom call? Remember that your partners will always have to be, right there with you. So, how can you kind of evolve your planning to include other people who might be able to be of help to you? We also noticed there's really a need for more guidance on how to plan for community engagement, right? So like community engagement planning, it doesn't just happen. There are lots of things to consider when you're thinking about, doing an outreach event or an activity, things like the best time of year, school calendar, even community engagement fatigue. I know that fall is usually like super packed with Walk and Roll to School Day and fall festivals and back to school and Halloween and other, celebrations that are happening in the fall. After a while, it can be, a bit tiring, both for you and even sometimes for the community. So, when is the best time to kind of do your engagement, and how can you keep the calendar in mind? Even things like cultural events and different holidays, how does that play a role in your, in your community engagement planning process? So those are things we kind of hope to work, through, in 2023 and think about more. But we did want to bring that to your attention as something that we were thinking about when we discussed, planning for community engagement. And then of course there's implementation. So, we know, you do the research and you reflect and you partner and you create your plan, and then it's actually time to do something with all of that. And so I'm curious if, I know I just talked about the future, but going back to the past for a moment, if you implemented anything new in 2022. So I'm just curious if there's somebody who, tried out something new, even if it's something that's really small. I'd love to hear what happened in 2022 for you. What did you do? What did you do that was new? I'm taking a look in the chat box too, to kind of get a sense of what people have been sharing in here. Okay. So anything new from 2022? And I know that here at the partnership, we did our virtual Safe Routes to School Summit. So that was something that was new, that was new for us and definitely new for me. So I'm curious if there's anybody else who did anything new this past year. Bike rodeos, helmet distribution, first Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, awesome. I've seen a lot of love for Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day on the listserv, so that's great. Nice. So it's always nice to try out something, kind of new and different. And again, implementation matters because this is really our program in action, helps keep the excitement going, creates new opportunities for people to, engage and participate. It's also just time to be, hopefully doing things that are, both fun and celebratory, depending on what the event is that you're putting together. So some things that we saw here at Safe Routes, kind of thinking about some national trends, a lot of like tactical urbanism and pop-up demonstrations. We saw a lot more of those in 2022. Walking school bus enthusiasm. I think part of it's enthusiasm and part of it's also just like it's a real solution for the school bus and bus driver shortage. So lots of interest in walking school bus programs, starting them, growing them, which is awesome to see. A lot of questions about scooters and skateboards, both just like, education materials, but also just acknowledgement that, lots of kids are rolling to school on more than just bikes. So scooters and skateboards, definitely something that's kind of being incorporated into the Safe Routes world. And then also high school engagement. So again, kind of, thinking about Safe Routes School expanding to older students, what does that look like? How can you engage high school students in Safe Routes to School? And what are some of the, specific elements that make Safe Routes relevant to, to high school students? So for our Colorado working group, actually a lot of their implementation is either in progress or coming in 2023. So I know that Pueblo, they're working on their, on their community interviews right now, and are, kind of in the heart of their interview and community conversation process. In Boulder, they're really looking forward to doing some partnership asset mapping in the next year, and hopefully connecting with community members around, bike education and bike use. So more from us and from them in 2023. We'll have more updates and highlights to share with you all. And then just a few, things that I've noticed that seem pretty cool, that I kind of wanted to, highlight. The first was Walk Bike Nashville, had their Walk and Roll to School Day, same day in October that everybody else did, and had, I think, like 45 schools participate, and this was their 21st celebration, I believe. So they invited a local college. They brought out their marching band. They had a mariachi band. There's a little great news clip that I'll link to in the slide deck here. But definitely check that out. Safe Routes to School Tucson, they presented at our Safe Routes to School Summit and had a lot of great information. One being a walking school bus program that has like 100 students, which was pretty amazing to see, like this long line of students participate in the walking school bus program. They also do the Ciclovia Tucson, where they block off the street and kind of have different vendors and activities and things for students to participate in. So that was definitely a highlight, seeing that huge walking school bus program. It was really awesome. And there's a really cool video contest that Massachusetts Safe Routes to School and MassDOT put on around road safety and paying attention to road signs. So they had high school students, develop their own, PSAs and videos, and thinking about high school engagement, and have some. They put together some videos and had them on their YouTube page and had like a little, video contest. I don't know what the prize was, but that was another great example of what high school engagement can look like. And again, I'll link the video and the web page in my follow-up email. But those are some really cool things that I noticed in 2022, along with so many others. And if you do have others, please feel free to share them in the chat, share some great things you all have worked on. If you want to share links, resources, please feel free to do so. We'd love to celebrate your success, highlight your success. So I'd love to hear what you all have been working on in 2022. So again, feel free to continue sharing. And just to close things out with sustainability. So the last part of the community engagement framework, and I won't say last because this work continues, it's ever evolving. But thinking about how to sustain your engagement beyond one single project or initiative. And like I mentioned before, engagement isn't just like a one and done thing. It's building those relationships. It's going back to community members and engaging over and over and over again in a variety of different ways and for a number of different reasons. So how can we keep this momentum, this energy, this engagement going? And so I'm actually curious to hear from you all. I know that winter can kind of be for some people, more of a dormant period as it relates to community engagement, whether it's like winter break, the holidays, weather. Community engagement kind of look a bit different when it's, snowing outside or raining or super cold. So I'm curious how you all keep community engagement going in the winter. What are some things that you do? Any strategies, tips, special celebrations? I'd love to hear, how your community engagement looks like, what it looks like in the winter months. And again, feel free to share ideas in the chat, share resources in the chat. I love the different things you all have already shared. Thinking about that winter engagement. What does that look like? What has that looked like? And again, thinking about some national trends in sustainability, we've noticed that there's this increase in Safe Routes to School funding. Definitely great, definitely important for sustainability. Incorporating safe routes into plans and policies, like I mentioned earlier. A lot of infrastructure investments, again, great for sustainability, making it, safer and easier for students to walk and roll to school, can help, sustain safe routes to school programs. And also these like networking calls, meetups, whether it's our informal Zoom chats we have at the partnership, your participation in the chat box and webinars, Safe Routes to School listserv, all those things kind of help keep that, keep that momentum going, and keep that engagement going. And again, just thinking about like sustaining engagement over the winter months, some things that we, kind of talk about here at Safe Routes, some tips, some things that you all do. Embrace the weather, whether it's having a winter walk to school day, rainy walk to school day, cool weather walk to school day. Great way to keep up that engagement during the winter months. Going virtual if necessary, Zoom still exists, Microsoft Teams still exist, phone calls still exist. How can we still make sure that we're incorporating virtual opportunities into our engagement efforts, spending the winter reconnecting with partners, so whether that's having a coffee and tea chat or just a Zoom chat or just checking in and seeing how different partners are doing, that can be a great way to kind of, keep your engagement going, during the winter. Doing some of those reflection activities. So thinking about, okay, how did our engagement go in the fall? How was our fall programming? How can we, incorporate those reflections into our, into the spring and into the next semester? And then along with that, planning for spring engagement. So, again, it's winter time, you're gonna have a little bit of a break, a little bit of, possible downtime. How can you use this time to plan for your spring events, for your spring engagement, whether it's a focus group or a listening session or a bike and roll to school day or bike education? How can you kind of use this as a planning period? And then also, honestly, taking a break to recharge. I am a huge proponent of breaks. It is okay to take a break and recharge. And sometimes that's, an important part of the community engagement process. Burnout is real, both as a community engagement, practitioner and also for the community. So taking a break is also totally fine. Like I said, I am a big proponent of that. So if you need to take a moment just to recharge, let the community recharge, also fine. I say go for it. Just a few like winter engagement, highlights. Minnesota Safe Routes to School, they're kind of known for their winter walk to school day and really embracing the Minnesota, cool Minnesota weather. So if that's something that you might not have thought about for your community engagement efforts, embracing the weather. So doing a winter walk to school day, winter roll to school day, frequent winter walker, punch cards or contests, that can be a great way to, again, keep that momentum and that engagement continuing through, through the winter and really celebrating some of the possibilities of walking and rolling during the colder months. So along with winter walk and roll to school day, winter walk and roll audits. So again, knowing that like your experience traveling to school in the winter might be different than, if there's snow on the ground, rain on the ground, when it's super cold. So how can you really use this time to think about what those conditions are like when they might not be super ideal, when it's not like a warm, sunny day. So winter walk and roll audit could be an idea. Winter gear giveaways, hats, gloves, scarves. Can you pair that with an event that you're doing during the winter time, knowing that that might be a barrier for students walking to school, not having, proper, winter gear. Crossing guard appreciation, never a bad time to appreciate our crossing guards, and also community listening sessions. So could that be a part of winter engagement as well? And again, if you have other ideas, please feel free to share them in the chat box. So that's kind of a quick overview of all the great things that have been going on this year. I think it would take me forever to talk about every single thing, and I'm so glad that you all have been able to add some of your own ideas and successes into the chat box as well. That's what we love to, what we love to see, what we love to hear. So again, I mentioned this in my first community engagement presentation of the year, and I will say it again in this one. I think you all have done a great job of doing this, virtually in the chat box, but being able to talk to each other, share ideas, share thoughts, share resources is extremely important, especially if there are people who don't necessarily look, think, or act like you. So that is my parting message as we wrap up our year of community engagement for Safe Routes to School. And also just a reminder that, I've always said that Safe Routes to School is really a team effort, and that together is the way. And so, we learn together, we plan together, we celebrate together, we, rise to challenges together. So, continuing to kind of keep the, keep that collaboration and that team spirit alive is important. And as I take some final questions or thoughts, if anybody wants to share, one word that they hope sums up their Safe Routes work in 2023. So we started with one word that summed up 2022. Now, what do you hope will sum up 2023? And also somebody asked about the chat box being saved. I can save the chat box. So if anybody wants a link to the chat, please do let me know. And just to close out today, one word that you hope sums up your work in 2023 as we round out our final 60 seconds. So I saw someone say action, creative. That was going to be my word. Kyler, so we'll share creative, expand, engaging, collaboration, community focused, beautiful, grow. So again, any words you want to bring into 2023? Fun, yes, can never have too much fun. Success. All right, keep them coming. Just a few last minute reminders before we wrap up for today. Our Colorado webinars will be back in January. Our first one will be January 24th. We'll be talking about Safe Routes to School plans and policies. So how to incorporate Safe Routes to School into existing plans and policies, like Vision Zero plan, wellness plan, comprehensive plan. So we'll talk about that. And then other upcoming topics will include evaluation. Part 2, we did one this fall. We'll do another one in the spring. And also how to partner with school districts and featuring some great Colorado programs as a part of that. So more to come in 2023, which is very exciting. And then lastly, here's my information. If you need to contact me, I will send out a follow-up email with the recording, a quick survey, presentation slides. I have saved the chat box, so if people want have questions or want to get in touch with anybody, please let me know. I will have the chat box saved. And with that, I will leave you with all of these wonderful words that you've shared. So fun, engagement, growth, success, participation, sustainability, collaboration, expand, creative, action, some great words to sum up 2022 and lead us into 2023. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you all have a restful and pleasant holiday season, winter season. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, and we will see you all in January. So take care, and thank you, everybody. Have a good one.